Hello, my dear storytellers. Today's theme is persistence. We just had a little technical glitch, but I am really glad to see that many of you have found us, still broadcasting from Facebook and still broadcasting live on YouTube. So the link may have changed. But if you're on Facebook, you're in the Path of the Storyteller Facebook group. You can go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, get permission to show your name. If you're looking for me on YouTube, here I am waving and talking. So it's on the YouTube channel. I think just the link got changed because we had to reboot. So thank you for your persistence, everyone. I'm really glad to see you here. And I appreciate, there we've got folks in the comments. Tracy's here from Anchorage, Alaska. I love to see you here, Tracy. We've got Hillary. Hello, Hillary from the other side of the Atlantic, if I may say so. And Anne is here, and we solved the glitch. And Anne says that she is glad we got it worked out because she's excited about this topic. So I'm glad, Anne. I'm glad. We made a little extra effort. Constanza's here as well. What a wonderfully international group we have here for today's live stream. So listen. Today's theme is theme. That is the topic about which some of you are so excited. And it is a kind of an interesting topic. We're going to talk about the themes in our fiction. What is it? What is theme? It sounds like something that we would perhaps be called upon as students in school to write about. Like, here's something. What's the theme? Write a book report, write a paper. You know, it's a word that has like a kind of vagueness about it, even maybe a little discomfort, right? Because most of us have been warned or feel within ourselves that we don't want to be preachy in our work. And so as soon as we start talking about theme, that's a little specter that rises up, right? So today we're going to talk about theme. What is it? How does it get into our work? Where exactly does it reside in our work? Who puts it there? Do we put it there? Does it show up by accident? Do our readers put it there in their interpretive, imaginative experience with our work? Are they the ones that create the theme? It's a really kind of an interesting question. So that's what our topic is today. And again, thank you all for your persistence in getting here to the live stream. I really do appreciate it. So before we get started, if you're new around here, let me introduce myself. I'm Mary Rosewood. I am a writer. I'm going to talk a little bit about my writing today, just to let you know how I got onto this theme, why I'm thinking about it. I'm best known as a writer of middle grade fiction, but I've written many, many kinds of things. And I am also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own platform where I train writers, I mentor writers, I teach writing craft and story structure. And one of the things that I like to do is to go live every week on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time, more or less, unless we have a technical problem like we had today, to just talk a little bit, really quite informally, about story structure, writing craft, and the mindset of the working writer. And when I say informally, what I mean is that I think about what's on my mind as a writer, because like you, I'm a writer and I'm just thinking about it a lot. What makes good writing good? What's going on in my own work? What's going on in the writing community that makes me go, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about that. You know, just whatever's going on. We think about it. And I like to go live because why? Because we can do it interactively. It becomes a live stream dialogue. So we've got folks here leaving comments, asking questions, and importantly, adding their own insights to the conversation, which I always try to weave in. So if you're here live for the first time, don't be shy, leave a comment. It's really great to make this a two-way conversation. And if you're watching the replay, same, leave a comment below. I'll get notified that you've left a comment. I'll come in and answer it. Maybe some of our other storytellers will want to enter into a conversation about it as well. We keep the conversation going, and that's how the community builds. So one more thing I want to say before we get started. I just don't want to miss it in case anybody can't stay to the end. I made a freebie for you guys, and I'm so excited about it. It was really a lot of fun to do. There's a link that you can click to download, pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. I hope that's easy enough to remember. You can find it in the notes below, or just type that into your browser and get it. And what this download is totally free download. You just put your email address in and you'll get an email from me that will deliver it to you. It's actually a full, like 32-page workbook, a fillable PDF where I just kind of went nuts a little bit and I created 30 different writing prompts. So it's 30 writing prompts in 30 days, but they're not random writing prompts. They're designed to kind of nudge you along, coach you a little bit in brainstorming material for your own story from beginning through the middle to the end. So these are sneaky writing prompts that are just going to nudge you along the lane of developing a full story structure. So I think this is a super freebie. Let me put this up one more time. And I hope that I hope you'll take advantage of it. Whether you're already a Path of the Storyteller student or you're new to Path of the Storyteller, just feel free to grab this. This is free from Media. Okay. Beautiful. All right. I want to tell you where I got the idea for today's theme of theme. If you follow me on social media, you might have seen this morning that I posted a link to a really lovely brief article about my most recent middle grade book, which is called Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale. And what happened was that the lovely books editor at the Christian Science Monitor, which is a great publication, contacted me because she heard about the book and she wanted to talk about its themes. And she herself read it and was able to tell me the themes that she found in the book. And I had that really satisfying experience that I hope you all get to have if you haven't had it already. And I hope I continue to have it because it's really one of the things that makes this job super fun. It's when somebody out there reads your book and it's very clear from the way they talk about the book to you that they read the book that you wrote, the book that was in your head, the book that you were trying to get on the page, landed intact in their imaginative experience when they read it. So we had a lovely conversation. There's this great little column about the book's themes. And again, I put the link below so you can check out that article. It'll only take you a minute to read. It's really sweet. But we talked about hope. We talked about bravery. We used words like vulnerability. And we talked about the idea of the book kind of demonstrating that, my vision that we live in a world where things can change and things can get better. Things can change for the better. So I just wanted to put those words forward because there's a kind of an abstract feeling about them. Hope, bravery, vulnerability, positive change. And right away, we're not talking about the plot of the book, are we? You know nothing about the actual plot of Alice's Farm from me just offering those words. But I hope that that list of words gives a little sense of what kind of book it is. Essentially, what they're doing is they're pointing you at the theme. We're talking about the theme of the book. And I'm going to define theme in a second, but I want to just tease apart this notion that there's a kind of a shortcut way to talk about what our book's about in what we might call the log line way, what Hollywood calls the log line. And that's like the 1 or 2 sentence version of the plot. And so if I were to give you a log line for Alice's Farm, this is the kind of thing you'd see, maybe listed next to the book, where it shows up in bookstores, listings. It's a quickie about what the book is about. So it might be something about, a group of wild Cottondale rabbits band together with their fellow animals to, save the local their farmland home from destruction or something like that. It just gives you a sense like, oh, it's an animal story. It's about animals who try to, save a farm, who, if the log line was a little longer, or maybe a little more well-crafted, if I thought about it more, it would have to do with the fact that they cooperate even with the farmers themselves, their traditional enemies. Just a sense of rabbits cooperating with farmers and their natural predators to save the local farm that they all call home. Something like that, right? That's a log line. Now, I've done live streams in the past where I asked you or challenged you to focus on this question of what's your book about in a way that might lead you to be able to rattle off a log line about your book. 1 or 2 sentence version of what happens in it. Like, what is it about? Enough to communicate to a person who's never heard of you or your book, like, oh, a story about animals cooperating with each other and with humans to save the local farm. That sounds kind of fun. Like, I'd like to read that. I love rabbits. I love farms. I like the idea of cooperation. Like, it's just enough to give somebody a sense of like, oh, I like it or I don't like it. But notice what words are not in that log line. There's no mention of hope, bravery, vulnerability, the possibility of positive change. That's not it. The logline is what the book is about. These words that start to feel like, oh, that's the theme, don't communicate that. They communicate something else. And also what the book is about, but in a different way. So that's where I want to start today. I just want to talk about the difference between those two kinds of things, what theme is, and then we're going to get to this notion of how does the theme end up being expressed in the book. And then I also want to briefly address the resistance that some of us may have, or the concern that some of us may have about going too far with the idea of theme and being quote unquote preachy or didactic, too on the nose about it. If you've got questions about any of that, start layering them into the comments so that I can weave them into the discussion. Okay, I always love it when you do that. All right, so now we talked about logline. And by the way, it's a useful exercise. So I do want you to be thinking about the log lines of your books. It's a very useful exercise. But what is theme? What is theme? This strange string of abstract words that yet seem to communicate something really fundamental about my book in the case of this article, and that ultimately, there might be a string of abstract words like that communicate something really central and fundamental about your book. The definition of theme, in a simple way, is like the subject, in the idea sense, the abstract sense. So it's not the subject as rabbits and farmers; it's the idea. What's the abstract meaning, the underlying meaning, not the what happens on the surface, the underlying meaning. And then there's another really useful definition of theme, which is simply an idea that recurs throughout a work of art. And, you can think of themes in music. That's a place where we might talk about themes. And in a work of music, the recurring themes are like melodies, right? Just little tunes or portions of tunes or even intervals of notes that become like motifs. They become they would get repeated enough that they become, in a sense, like an invented language that just exists within that work. So the idea of repetition is something else that we can explore when we talk about themes. So this meaning of underlying meaning, main idea, but not in the what happens way, in the abstract way. And it very likely has a quality of repetition about it, which is to say it doesn't just appear once in a work. It reappears, it reoccurs. And like a melody in a well-constructed work of music, it may not be the same when each time it occurs. It may have variations. You all know this phrase, right? Theme and variations. So I want you to really bear that in mind as we talk about theme in fiction. It's not like saying the same thing over and over. It's a core idea that gives you something that you might want to reintroduce, invert, show in different colors, share at different tempos, offer a different accompaniment each time, like just to keep sort of crocheting around it, showing it to us in different lights from different angles. So that's it. So that's the definition of theme. And so before we talk about where theme comes from in your work, whether it's something that just falls down from the storytelling gods, or whether it's something that you consciously invent and insert in a mechanical way, let's go back to the larger question of where does the whole idea of the book come from in the first place, right? Because that's the first question. If we're going to ask where the theme of the book comes from, like where did the book come from anyway? We've talked also in a previous live stream a little bit about this, And there are three ideas that I'll share. In my experience, the idea for a book, the spark, if you will, can show up in so many different kinds of ways. But for most of us, it either is that we got an idea for a character, we got an idea for a plot, or we got interested in a premise. And this is something that some writers may say, well, I always get the character idea first, or I always get an idea for a plot first, or I always get an idea for a premise first. So what does that mean? If you're the kind of writer that is character driven, yes, this is where you're going to get your ideas. You're going to think of somebody. You're going to read about a historical figure. You're going to overhear a conversation. You're going to maybe come up with an imagined scenario that maybe rings true personally, that might lift a little bit from your autobiography, but it's going to be fictionalized. So you're really starting from character. Those writers will often say, I have this great character, I just don't know what the plot is. All right, some of you might find yourself in that predicament. So there's that. If you're the kind of writer that is plot driven, you might come up with an idea for a story, right? You might say, well, wouldn't it be amazing if, I don't know, if rabbits and farmers had to find a way to cooperate because they're eternal enemies, and what scenario could I create that would make them just have to overcome their inborn suspicion of each other and mistrust of each other? They would have to lay down the label of you are the enemy and try to work together for a common cause. So that's almost like that veers a little bit into premise, what I just said, but it involves this idea of like rabbits and farmers and all of that stuff. But and that, I have to say, that is probably a fairly accurate notion of why I decided I wanted to write Alice's Farm. In that case, maybe a combination of plot and premise. So I'll tease those two things apart. Like pure plot inspiration is literally, the Hollywood version of like, oh, what if there were snakes on a plane? What if there was a plane and snakes got loose? It's a kind of a what if inspiration. Like, what if this happened? What if that happened? So you're very focused on the action. Very focused on the action. The premise is this idea that, and I made that a little bit muddy in the explanation because, of course, as soon as I start to talk about my own book, I've got a little too much to say, so I can't keep it clean bullet points. But the idea of premise being like, wouldn't it be interesting if enemies had to cooperate, right? And then who would those enemies be, and what means would make them have to cooperate? The one thing that I really want you to get from this little rundown of character inspiration, plot inspiration, or premise inspiration is that no matter where you start, you're going to have to get the others filled in. So if you come up with a character, you're going to have to invent a plot. And if you come up with a plot, you're going to have to populate it with characters. And if you're the kind of writer that gets kind of inspired by ideas, concepts, this kind of conceptual inspiration, it is an essay until you invent character and plot, right? I didn't write an essay about enemies cooperating. I wrote a book about rabbits having to save a farm. I had to invent a rabbit, her name is Alice, to be the hero of the story. And so you just see that it turns into like just three different ways of looking at the same thing. So from which of these sources of inspiration do you think theme comes from? Well, clearly it's more aligned with this notion of the premise, the concept, the ideas behind it. And so if you're a kind of a concept-driven writer, or if this particular project that you're working on happens to be concept-driven, because, I say writers tend to do this or tend to do that or tend to do that, but the truth is that we may surprise ourselves. We may be character-driven writers typically, but then one day we get a great idea for a plot and it's off to the races. Or we may typically be very plot-driven, but then we find that there's an issue, a concept, an idea that's nibbling away at us, and we're thinking about it a lot. And we naturally, as writers, say, well, what can I say about this? What kind of story can I get to explore this idea? You know, how can I develop an idea out of this? So, so premise sort of ends up being the place that this theme is gonna live. But if you don't start with premise, you may find yourself being very involved with character and plot, and then saying, "Yeah, but I'm not consciously working with abstract ideas." Now, if they all get interwoven, what's going to happen is that sooner or later, as your character develops and as your plot develops, no matter which one comes first, if you're not being driven by premise to begin with, you're going to have to make decisions about what your character does, because that's what a story is. It's your character doing things in pursuit of some objective, and the things that they do have a kind of causality about them. Things happen in sequence, not randomly, but it's a string of dominoes that has this chain of causality. And as soon as you start inventing that, and I don't want to get too highbrow about this, but as soon as you start talking about what causes something to happen, you're already in a realm that's kind of conceptual, because what you're saying is that it's not a random universe. Like, storytelling itself has a sense built in that things do not happen for no reason. Now, I want you to think about the books you like and maybe the books you don't like. If on every page or two in a book that you were reading, something happened for no reason, had nothing to do with what just happened, and had nothing to do with what was going to happen after it, that's not going to be a very satisfying read. And I am sure that few of you would stay with a book like that for very long. It wouldn't give you much pleasure. There's no narrative in it. And so think about the fact that narrative itself has a premise built in, which is that things cause other things to happen. Things happen for a reason. The choices that we make matter. They reveal character. They have an impact on the world. Like, well, it's very interesting that storytelling already contains something like this. So even if you're just playing around with character and plot, there's a kind of theme accruing. You know, there's something accruing at the bottom of the pot. And what I'm going to suggest for those of you that don't consciously work with it is to not be afraid to notice it. Not be afraid to notice it. Your character and your plot and your theme are all going to end up being intertwined. And you are going to start to notice it. I think you will. And when you notice it, I want you to, like, give yourself a little gold star, draw a happy face on the calendar that day, because now you've got all three legs of the stool kind of working together. You've got character, you've got plot, but you've also spotted your theme. You might have spotted it in the wild. Maybe you haven't caught it yet. Maybe it's still kind of running around. You're getting glimpses of it between the trees, but now you kind of know what you're looking for. So remember what I said about repetition. When you find what you're looking for thematically while you're writing, now is an interesting time to start thinking about the different ways that you can use this in your work. Don't think of it as something that the reader's going to get to the last page and something will happen that will reveal the theme. No, that's not really what theme is. Theme is this kind of pattern of meaning that's woven throughout an entire work, not by being hammered again and again and again and again, because that's not a pleasant experience for the reader, but by providing you, the writer, with a kind of ongoing writing prompt, if you will, to keep asking yourself, oh, how can I say this? How can I express this theme in a different way, through a different character, in a different scenario? How can I make it louder? How can I make it softer? How can I invert it? How can I challenge it? How can I have it be true in this case and maybe more complicated in this case? So whatever the theme is that you find yourself sniffing out in your work, it is an invitation to you to explore theme, but importantly, variations. You may find that getting a little bit conscious about what that theme is it hope? Is it courage? Is it what are we willing to sacrifice to save our home? Is it the complexity of seeing someone that we might have had a preconceived notion is our enemy as something else, the complexity of dropping the label about some other and getting closer so we can see them more accurately? Is it about the experience of being seen inaccurately by someone who has put a label on us, and what that feels like and what we might do in response to feeling misunderstood or mislabeled or dismissed, or all of these ideas? You see, those become really interesting writing prompts, don't they? Where else can I put this in? How else can I find a room to explore this idea? So your theme is not limiting. It's quite the opposite. It is like a tremendous generator of ideas. It's like a great improv exercise. So that's really what I want you to think about as writers when you think about theme. I want you to think about how soon in your own process you might know what it is. And I hope I've communicated that some of you may go into the book saying, oh, I know what I'm writing about. I know that this is really my book about, um, dysfunctional families and healing, or you may go in with whatever it may be. And in fact, if some of you want to share these themes, because it's going to feel kind of generic, it would be really interesting to know if you had to name the theme of your current work in progress, what it would be. I would love to see those in the comments. So if you know what it is, good for you. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that every page of your book is, this is my story about healing a dysfunctional family. This is my story. Well, here's another page of my story about healing a dysfunctional family. No. It's the writing prompt that you use to invent what? Character and plot that demonstrate this, that keep acting out theme and variations on this idea. Never just settle for the statement of the theme and say, my job is done. Pick at it. Challenge it. Look in the corners of it and see what you find. Push it until you yourself are, it's like you're a debate society and you've got to debate both sides of it. Don't be so easy to swallow your own original thinking about it. You may learn a lot about your theme by putting it through the paces of storytelling, because that's what storytelling does, right? It really makes us put our ideas through the paces. We've got to develop them over the course of 3 well-structured acts. So that's my advice. Don't be afraid to notice it. Don't be afraid to use it as writing prompt to create variations on it. And if you do that, you are going to find that it is embedded everywhere in your character and your plot. And thus the storytelling is going to contain it. It's going to be made of it. It's going to be woven in. So it's not going to be something that you need to state like the moral at the end of Aesop's fables. Now, this is now my chance to segue into this idea of preachiness. And I want to bring up a comment that Anne posted, which is really great. And Anne says that she loves good nonfiction. And by the way, I know she posted this a little earlier in my comments. I believe, Anne, in response to me saying it's a concern many writers have about not wanting to be preachy. I think that's when you said, so it's not just me. That's right. It's not just you. It's something that makes writers self-conscious. And you share you love good nonfiction, as do I, but don't feel comfortable sharing ideas in a direct, didactic way, except with your lucky family. Very good. I imagine the dinner table conversations are quite vigorous and entertaining, Anne. This is right. You see what Anne says. Like, we may feel comfortable in the realm of debating ideas, but when we sit down to write fiction, we don't want it to feel like that. We don't want it to feel like just a Socratic argument. We don't want it to feel like a dialogue where characters are just mouthpieces for our ideas. And I'm not going to call out names of any books out there, and I'm not even really thinking of specific ones, but I bet you can think of books that have that feeling. It's just this character represents this idea and that character represents that idea, and that kind of didasticism, as Anne says, it just becomes what you notice instead of what? Becoming immersed in a fictional dream and identifying with the main character and going on this fantastic imaginative ride within the story. That's what we want. And that's true whether you're writing for kids or grown-ups. The experience of loving a good story is the same. It is an imaginative experience. It's immersive, and we want our reader to believe in it for the duration that we have their attention. We want them to believe that our story is something that they're part of, not, intellectually processing. So I want to also say that I think that this fear of being preachy can go too far. Now, I've just made an argument in favor of don't be preachy, with the solution being to weave your theme in a multitude of creative ways. Let it be the fabric of the story, not the saying that you embroider on top of the story. But I also want to say, let's look at the other side of this, that do you think that Charles Dickens was worried about being preachy when he wrote A Christmas Carol? I don't think he was. Would any of us want to change one word of A Christmas Carol? I mean, I hope the answer is no. I know that I wouldn't. Is there any doubt what the themes and values expressed in that little masterpiece are? No, not at all. We actually, as readers, love and feel nourished by books that have the courage of their convictions and inhabit a set of values and express them wholeheartedly. We get pleasure from that. And it's an incredibly useful form of spiritual instruction, if you will, right? It's just really useful. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just something that they did in the old days that we can't do anymore. Storytelling invites us to think about the right way to solve problems. And because guess what? Our story is going to be full of problems. Every page of our story is about our hero overcoming obstacles. And so our job is to keep inventing that process of engaging with obstacles and solving them or failing to solve them. And so, your values are going to come into play. Your moral intelligence is going to come into play as you develop a story. There's no way it can't. If you refuse to engage it, then what metrics are your characters using to identify what's good and what's bad? What constitutes a solution to a problem? What constitutes, not an acceptable solution to a problem? At the end of your story, what's going to happen? Are things going to be better? Are things going to be worse? There are different types of stories. There's stories in which there is a sense that the struggle of the hero is meaningful and that things are improved by the hero's struggle. We've gone on a journey and it was worth it. Growth happened, change happened. That in itself is a set of values to express. Then there's other stories that have tragic endings in which, in a sense, sometimes feel even more grounded in values and morals, because what we see is that there is a tragic outcome to a character's failure to engage properly with their moral intelligence. Tragic heroes fail because of and they end up being tragic. They meet tragic ends because they fail to see the writing on the wall. They fail to drop their ambition or their pride or their ego and kind of, get around to a more holistic way of thinking, right? They fail for a reason. So we're always toying with these ideas. And since it's kind of built into the work of telling stories, I just want to offer you an awareness of that. Don't be so reluctant to let your own moral intelligence shine in your work, that you hamstring your storytelling. Stories are animated by moral decisions, no matter whether it's a story with a happy ending, a tragic ending, or what in cinema they would call a noir ending, which is like it's neither happy nor tragic. It's just like the world is kind of amoral and random, and it's in a sense the darkest type of storytelling. Tragedy kind of implies that yes, bad things happen, but there's a reason for them. And noir has this kind of sense of like, no, bad things happen because the world is random. So, to my mind, that's kind of the darkest sort of storytelling. So this is also interesting. I hope you find it so. I love to think about these things. I'm going to bring up some comments to just make sure we have time to address them all. Oh, I hope you guys will welcome me sharing this. We've got some takers for my invitation to share themes of books you're working on now. Anne is working on a theme, is vision, what we see versus the way we look at things. So it sounds, Anne, like exploring the idea that the way we look at things actually creates what we see, and that maybe there's not full accuracy in that. Right, the way we look at things can change. If we change, the world we see changes. That's just an interesting theme. Really, really interesting. And Hillary sharing a theme. What is it okay to do to protect those we care about? Oh, wonderful idea, Hillary. That's like a really nice way of expressing it. When is the cost to other people too high? That might be the theme of current book, though not certain. Hey, look, you're spotting something galloping between the trees. So keep looking. But that's really interesting. How far is it correct to go to protect those we care about? Really interesting. And Constanze is making an effort, a brave effort, though she says that it's hard. It may be hard, it may still be coming into focus. But here's what Constanze shares today. Possibly it could be about courage, the courage to find one's own position within a team and live it. Oh, interesting, Constanze. So you're looking at, I guess, the tension between individual identity and a kind of a collective identity. And it takes a certain amount of courage to be an individual when you are also strongly identified as part of a team or a group. Very, very interesting. Really, really great. And Tracy sharing also. You guys are on fire today. I love it. Let's see. Tracy says that her story's theme is the courage each of us needs to be uniquely who we are. Oh, great. It's fun to create obstacles for her hero to overcome. And you're putting her through the ringer. Tracy, well done. Putting our hero through the ringer is a storyteller's job. We are really nice people in real life. That is evident. But when we sit down to work, our hero goes, no, not you again. What are you going to do to me today? Here, I've got a comment from someone. I don't know who you are, alas, because Facebook users what's coming up, but I'm sure that I know who you are in real life. The whole process is fascinating. And our Facebook user says, I don't know my theme either, but it might be something like people live their lives as if they live on different planets. Oh, that's so interesting. Absolutely. Yes. The idea that each individual has created, in a sense, their own environment and they live within it, and how challenging it can be to communicate across that divide. Jaren's here. And let's see, Jaren is saying, trying for theme is important, but you won't see what the story is actually about till you're at the end of it. Now rewrite. Now that's in quotes. Now I'm quoting you, Jaren. If you're quoting somebody else, let us know who said it. But that sounds really strong. You may not see, and I think Jaren brings in a good point, underscoring one of the points that I made earlier, which is that if you don't start with an awareness of the theme, you may not see much of what it is until you really start developing plot and character. That is really important to remember. But it'll turn up. And when it does, you just offer it some treats and see if you can coax it forward a little bit. And Jaren's giving us an attribution. Thank you. Yes, from a Pixar storyboard artist named Emma Coates. Thank you for that attribution, Jaren. It's a really good quote. And Nancy, yes, okay, Facebook user was our very own Nancy. So that's so great to see. This is so wonderful. And I agree with Constanza, who now says that she really wants to read all these books. And that's just a wonderful idea to end with, because you see how compelling it is to talk about theme. And as I experienced, and I started out today's live stream by talking about this lovely article about Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale in the Christian Science Monitor this week. And when people hear about the themes of your book, it's really compelling, because that's the feeling that they're going to have when the book is over. They're going to feel like, I really had an exploration of that theme. The plot is really nice too. The logline is good, but the logline appeals to the intellect, and the theme appeals to us on a more emotional and spiritual level, I would say. And it's really compelling. And even just talking without any sense of what the plot might be, what the logline might be, just talking about these themes, it makes us lean forward and say, oh, wow, I would love to read a story that explores that theme. So you see how compelling it is. And so, Constanza, thank you so much for giving us a graceful way to end today. Theme is important. Theme is important. And I do think that writers are sometimes instructed, oh, don't preoccupy yourself with that. It'll happen, as the quote that Jaren shared kind of says, you won't know what it is till later. And that may well be true. But later for a novelist is, to me, possibly as you're getting well into a first draft, or maybe when you've written a first draft. And as you all know, when you are writing fiction and you get to the end of a first draft, you are still early in the process. You're not at the end of your process. It's not the end of the road. Writing the first draft is, if you can get your character worked out and your plot kind of hammered out and start to sniff out what your theme is, that's a fantastic first draft. That's a first draft that's really doing its job for you as a writer, because now you get to go and really do the work. Now you get to go and do the work. So there will be that point when it's all starting to come into play. Tracy has noticed that my cat, as ever, is a bit of a photo bomber, and he likes to come in here and be part of our live streams occasionally. I think that he likes this theme. I think cats are really good at theme. They really know how to hold still and be philosophical. So I think maybe Ralph's got something, he's trying to share with us. All right, my friends, this has been a delightful discussion of a really interesting topic. I'm so grateful that you were all here, and I really love your contributions today. And we've got one more question. I'll bring this up from Tracy before we wrap up, because I know we started a couple of minutes late, and I don't want to be shortchanging anybody. Oh, this is for Anne. Very nice. Tracy notes that Anne's theme reminds her of Pride and Prejudice. How we view people may change on our worldview, and that's it. And so that's great. So Tracy and Anne are going to have a conversation about this. You can keep this going in the comments. I love it. And I'll tell you something. It's hard sometimes to get someone to give us the kind of feedback on a whole book that, we've written a whole draft and we want feedback on it. That's a big ask to get people to read a whole draft of something. But to have even conversations about theme and plot is really useful. And that's why it's good to not be afraid to talk about it. Because you can start to tell by the looks on people's faces when you say, this is the theme of the book I'm working on, or this is the logline for the book I'm working on. You're going to be able to see them go, what? Or see them go, oh gosh, now see, I'm really interested in reading that. And these wonderful comments, like you see happening, the conversation in the comments right now is a really good evidence of that. All right. Very good, everyone. And listen, again, thank you for being here today. I want to just remind you that I've got this let me see if I can get it up for you again. Absolutely. I've got this download for you at pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. And I just want to make sure that you just help yourself to it. It's like an offering. It's like I'm putting out a little plate of cookies for you. And so, of course, I want you to take one. And if you do it, I have fun with the prompts and let me know what you think of them. It would be really great to know that some new stories are born by brainstorming with 30 prompts in 30 days. At some point, you might even discover your theme. Who knows? So, my friends, thank you again. I hope the rest of your day has a theme that, is something like fun, time outdoors, rest and relaxation, tasty treats, taking a nap like Ralph is demonstrating for us now. He's such an inspiration to me in that respect, always. Thank you so much for being here. And until I see you again, happy writing.